we are very proud to present to all of you No More Room, an installation here in our gallery, physically in the building, done by Kelly Bair and Kristy Balliet from BairBalliet. It's a phenomenal challenge that they took on to try to use this moment of crisis to rethink the relationship between reality, virtuality, immersive environments, and a whole series of other possibilities in between. So it's with a lot of excitement and happiness that, again, we feel back that the building is coming back to life. So hopefully we keep going in that trajectory. So I want to thank Kristy and Kelly for taking on the challenge and to work and run towards and not try to avoid it, even though there was the opportunity for them to reschedule the show. They saw it as what it is, an opportunity for creativity. So without further ado, let me introduce here in SCI-Arc, in the gallery, Kristy Balliet.
I'm joined with my partner, Kelly Bair. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Kristy. It's great to be in the same place at the same time with you. Rare occurrence.
Definitely fantastic. We've been waiting for tonight for a very long time. So for all of you out there, good evening and good morning, wherever you're joining in from. Tonight, Kelly and I, for the next 45 minutes, will take through our opening night to celebrate the opening of our exhibition, No More Room. We've imagined tonight as a variety show. Think late night with Kelly and Kristy, with a few interlopers and observations from who are going to be having conversations about the project. Essentially, we're going to be eavesdropping into their conversations the way that we would be if we were at a physical gallery show, juggling our drink and our snack, and we'd just come out of studio. So hold tight, start right now. Kelly.
So No More Room comes from 2 points of origin. The first is something we call the unstable image, which has to do with our cultural immersion in split screen aesthetics. Interfaces such as HD TV before and after television shows, Instagram story transitions that allow us, at least for a brief moment, to be in 2 places simultaneously. And of course, our current moment of ubiquitous Zoom rooms that we can all sympathize with. The second origin has to do with developing a design methodology that begins with a close examination of the architectural moments of spatial interchange. So these are things like door thresholds, windows, or even where a chair rail meets a door jamb. Through analysis and abstraction of these moments, core samples are designed that evoke a partial or incomplete construction of what we think of as a yet to be in the world spatial realm. So for us, a core sample offers a density of information in a small footprint and within a limited volume, a potent architectural concentrate, as we've referred to it. Cores oscillate between object and backdrop, interior and exterior, and mass and volume. So how does that play out in the exhibition itself? No More Room is both a physical construction in the gallery, which is the space we're in now, and virtual content delivered via a website that merges the physical and virtual world. The website features a split screen, with the left screen revealing a live feed camera showing the physical space of the gallery, and the right screen a moving camera that reveals produced content. So if you haven't already visited the website, it's on the SCI-Arc website events page, which is where you connected to the live stream. You can visit it there, or there's also a rotating kind of floating blue button. And if you click the blue button, it will also take you to the exhibition website. The last thing just to mention is that the exhibition is conceived of episodically, meaning the content will change through the course of the show. We've produced 3 episodes, and the plan is to drop them bi-weekly. And each of the episodes fall under the umbrella, the kind of thematic umbrella of ways in which we encounter or perceive rooms. So definitely check back in a couple of weeks to see episode 2. If you're currently looking at the website, you're viewing episode 1, and episode 3 will be towards the end of the run of the show. So that kind of situates the backstory of the project, as well as the physical and virtual components of the show. But Kristy, can you tell us what is in this gallery?
Sure, Kelly. Thank you very much for giving us a bit of context. So The first thing that you're going to notice when you walk into the exhibition is that there is a large designed object located near the center of the gallery. This is what Kelly and I have been calling the core. We define the core in two ways. One, through its architectural definition. So we could think of it as a stair core, an elevator, a dense spatial territory within a building, a room, or a home. The other definition, we think of it closer to a geologic definition. In this instance, we think of it as a core sample. The core sample is when physical material is extracted from the earth, and what you're left with layers of material that indicate a lot of information, including time. So I think in the research and conversations that Kelly and I have been having in the office over the last year or so, has had a lot to do with the idea of the value of architecture being complete. And we've become very interested, particularly in this exhibition, about asking the question, what happens when you design something to be incomplete? Acknowledging that it's going to be finished and completed by other information and by other audiences. So maybe we should also just talk about the form. I think as Kelly and I were working on this project, it was very important for us that there were moments of the project that had subtractive material, that was about other moments of the project that it became about additive qualities. One place that you can sort of see this is maybe where the core hits the ground. You can see that it's a large cylindrical object, but as it moves towards the ground, we begin to move material away so that it resembles a bit of a column, but by removing that material, it instead has a quite unstable relationship with the ground, sort of hinting that it might be able to be in multiple locations over time. The other place where we worked to subvert extrusion was how the object sort of hits the sky. You can see that we worked here to have that it would be a figured reaching on its tiptoes to peek out of the windows of the gallery, and is also meant to be in dialogue with people passing by up on the mezzanine. This was important to us because as you look at the object and as you move around the object, we were meant for people to think that there are moments where it's prioritizing the interior and moments when it's prioritizing the exterior. I think another thing to probably note, 6 foot in diameter and 16.5 foot tall. So even though it's only a single object in the gallery, it negotiates multiple spatial zones. The other element is that the physical, the texture of the object is intentionally a very rough texture that's used on every surface, the interior surfaces and the exterior surface. This also is meant to sort of help contribute to that flickering between interior and exterior. Maybe the other element materially is this single line that's on the backhand side of the core. That is a powder-coated line. And certainly at one moment when you look at it, it can seem and be associated a bit with a handrail. But at other moments when you look at it through the core, it's a cropped line that is more in dialogue with the graphic and the figuration that's happening behind it. The final elements that you will notice when you enter the gallery is that there are 3 large blue screens. Those blue screens are designed to flicker again between background and object. The background, because they are used to define the periphery of the room, and also background because they certainly have a pretty direct association with blue screens that are used in the film industry. And there, it's meant to create a seamless and immersive environment. However, in this project, as we work to have those blue screens also have object-like qualities, we were really deliberate to make sure we designed the figural edge and that there are moments when you're thickness, especially when the blue screens go from the wall to the floor. So, Kelly, have I forgot anything?
Yeah, I think you've covered the physical aspects of the show, and I touched on the virtual components of the show. But perhaps we should talk about the in-between, which is really where we see the exhibition conceptually lying.
For sure. Also, that makes a lot of sense because you and I, we are in the in-between right now. So we imagine the sort of in-between as the space where the physical object and the digital object merge together. Think of it like compositing of spatial worlds. I guess, Kelly, maybe one of the last things we should share is how do we see the role of the camera?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the camera is a point of view, as we know. And in the show, we see a point of view of really three characters. The physical camera, which is tracking around the core, the built core, and choreographing the distance between the physical core and the blue backdrop. The second camera has to do with putting the camera's eye inside of the animation and the digital content. And then the third eye is really you, or everyone who's watching the exhibition virtually through the website. So as that image is mediated to you through your screen, we are sort of orchestrating these 3 points of view and trying to choreograph the physical content with the virtual content.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. So that serves as our introduction to the show. We're now going to get on to, as we promised, a bit of the variety show. Our first segment that's coming up is entitled Real Talk. And it is going to be brought to you by At.John and Julia McMorrough, who are professors at the University of Michigan and partners at Apt Studio. They've gone back and dug up a conversation that we had with them over a year ago when we were beginning to think about the conceptual underpinnings of this project. And they are going to show you a few excerpts of that to hopefully help contextualize things.
Good evening, and welcome to this special broadcast of Practice Architecture Talks. Tonight, we've opened the Zoom archive vaults to follow up on a previous conversation with BairBalliet. With this, our hope is that these insights into how it started provide the space to explore how it's going. To honor the content, both present and absent, of the No More Room exhibition, we look to an unexpected predecessor, Albert Brooks's 1973 stand-up album, Comedy -1, his take on the music -1 idea, in which he encouraged you, the aspiring comedian, to hone your comedy chops through appearing on stage with Brooks himself. This send-up is more than the sum of its parts, a recording of Brooks, a script, and you. And the gag reveals something more deeply comedic, as Brooks allows himself to be deftly upstaged through his own writing by you in your silent absence. Through what is and what isn't in this gallery and its virtual incarnations, No More Room's core not only implies its others, but establishes new criteria for filling the spatial quiet, while testing our thresholds for uncomfortable silences. With that in mind, we present a conversation of only cores, no others.
I mean, I sort of mentioned that because as we have this conversation, it repeats a conversation we had. The work that we had talked about before, which was the things that right at the end, the No More Room, the SCI-Arc Gallery installation. No, it could be interesting as a virtual display. I mean, that would sort of, yeah, maybe not as satisfying architecturally, but I don't know, it would still make sense, I think, in that venue. I think the concept of core is super interesting. I think when the way you articulate it, it's a series of possible definitions of core. So you've, in a way, you've covered the answer to what I'm going to ask you. But I guess my question is, how do you know when you hit the core? So like once it's no longer the stairs and the bathroom, once it's no longer like, you know, because there's like one version of what you've told us, which is like the version of like X number of circles, each one of which is different, and then the space in between is a question mark. I think what you can see in your plan is that there are graphically even show like these notions of the discrete circle. I'm curious about like, because in the core sample, there's no theory of what's in between it in a way. So if you think about a skyscraper, there's some implication of the core to the perimeter, but like there's sort of like conceptually, there's nothing in between. There's a perimeter and there's a core, and then in between is just leasable space. And so, but like in all these examples, you're taking a core sample of which there's like lots of stuff in between, lots of intention. And so in this sort of diagrammatic breakdown between the gray core, this trying to work through like present figurality and the space between as a kind of negotiation. And I feel like I can read the impressions, but not their origin. It's a different kind of redaction. It's one of these things you get from the CIA where it's solid black and you read like somebody's name and like what they had for breakfast on another page. Like there's a sort of complete obliteration. If you say the word core, you need like, you know, like they have in the dictionary where they have like the subscripts for the different definitions held within the term. So when you use it architecturally, we're looking for the central spine or the thing that regulates. You're interested in this like geological core sample. So you need the part that hits multiple things. And so there's a little bit of curation, or you want, you know, I can tell why one would want lots of things in your samples because it's the stuff you're going to work with. But in a way, it's like your core is not necessarily the core spine, but it's the representative sample. It seems like a kind of, I don't know, a horizon of inquiry that you come up against. Like, what is the relationship between the full volume and its revelation? I don't know. It's funny. The notion of core. Yeah, I think this is, you know, it implies it's other. Like as soon as you identify one thing, because I think what's great about the work is you sort of drill into these. I think the line thing. I think the volume thing. I think the core thing. I think you find these things that seem kind of obvious, kind of clear. I'm going to do this thing, make it lines, but then you start to sort of pry away at it, and you find like these other things that come out as a result in a way. Problem of transitions. Suddenly, I understand it much more in relationship to this previous bit of the conversation where you're talking about insides and outsides, which is precisely an issue of transition.
Hi, my name is At.Irvin Shaifa. I'm a recent SCI-Arc graduate and project team leader for No More Room. Today, I'm joined by Malvin and Melody. They'll introduce themselves and we'll sort of talk about the process in making this very large installation. Malvin, if you care to introduce yourself, and then Melody.
Hi, I'm Malvin Bunata, a current fifth-year undergraduate student working on my thesis and joining in from LA. My role in the project was at the very beginning. I worked on the early stage of this project with BairBalliet in the summer of 2019 when they were developing the concept for what is now the exhibition, No More Room.
Hi, I am Melody Chu, a current MR2 student joining in from Hong Kong. I worked with BairBalliet in the final weeks of the exhibition production, specifically on the development of virtual content. I was part of a small group of workshop students that assisted remotely.
Thank you. So, Malvin, you worked on sort of the earlier stages of the project. You mind talking to us about that process and how you experimented with those mediums?
Yeah, so we started just like how a design project usually started, looking at precedents. We tried to identify what is considered the core for each building during the research. I understood these core samples as something beyond the vertical circulation of a building, as a shared territory where more meaningful exchanges happen in the architecture. For example, I would define the dining room, living room, and the space between the two in my house as the core because that is where the house members interact with each other the most. We then took these core samples from the precedents, composed them into a GIF animation to see how each core relates to each other. Later then, we picked some of our favorites and digitally modeled them. These then became the canvas for the moving images. We looked into how spatial qualities are applied to a 2D plane, like our phone screen. This was inspired by the accidental discovery on Instagram stories, as if these stories are projected onto one of the surfaces of this infinity cube, that when you swipe from one story to another, it reveals its three-dimensionality. This moment of transition allows a shared moment between the two stories, which relieves the flatness of these mapped images. We then experimented with green screen and overlaid these moving images, which resulted in new interpretation of physically modeled them out and tried to see and replicate them in the context of SCI-Arc Gallery.
Thank you. And it's fascinating you were talking about interpreting sort of digital screens in the space that SCI-Arc Gallery has. Melody, you were actually a part of episode 3 that's coming up, and you mind talking to us about that process and just sort of your role in the project as well?
I took on the role of designing and modeling parts of the rooms and was mainly focusing on doing different tests on the visualization of the animation. For me, the project is intriguing in the way that it's asking its audiences to re-see and reconfigure hidden spaces through this digital platform that it provides. It was very fun for me and the other workshop students to collaborate on this project, as throughout the process, we can be a part to propose and contribute our perspectives of these hidden rooms too.
Thank you. It's great you mentioned the sort of physical and digital aspects. I remember when we first started working on this project, after sort of Malvin and the team sort of worked on the initial design, it took some editing and thinking about the sort of fabrication that comes with such a large object like this in the middle of the gallery. Funny story, it wasn't initially going to even fit if you really, it's very large. And so when we were like figuring out the geometries, working through that physical and sort of digital back and forth, we had to sort of trim, I'd say 0.5 inches away from the surface, and it barely went in. So now it's probably the largest project that's largest one singular project that's gone to that door. So, that's for the records. And so I'd say the project in a sense is one that goes in between or constantly goes back and forth between working on the computer, thinking about space digitally, but also correlating that back to the physical realm or physical space. I think of something I'd like to bring up now that I've sort of talked about that with the two of you is how has that idea of space and thinking about the physical space, digital space, and the mediums of the moving image affecting our physical space, I'd say affect your architectural perspectives?
What I think is productive in working with moving images in architecture is the mistakes or misreadings that happen in the process of getting used to this type of representation, because it provides new perspectives in understanding how spaces can be rethought and redesigned. It also opens up new possibilities to challenge how we represent architecture, especially after going through this virtual phase, and to see how we flicker back and forth between the physical and digital.
Yeah, back and forth for sure.
For me, I always see that architects like us, we constantly work through 2D drawings and 2D models, but through working on this kind of medium of moving images, instead of seeing built spaces or architecture as something static, it has allowed me or us to discover in between spaces or see spaces in a multi-scalar or different perspective.
Fascinating. Actually, you sort of mentioned multi-scalar, which is, I'd say the exact feeling I get from working on this project with this team is the idea that we're not just working with SCI-Arc and the gallery, or even our digital sort of programs like Rhino, cinema, animation software, etc. Or even shout out to Betty and the guys with the fabrication of this and working in different things such as Autodesk. There's so many layers in this process, starting with Malvin and ending off with Melody and the rest of the team, that I would say makes this a multifaceted project for sure. It's something I'm looking forward for the rest of you to see as we keep unraveling these episodes. So with that being said, thank you, Malvin and Melody, for joining me with this sort of chat. Now we're going to go into the other sort of three speakers that are going to sort of talk about their sort of perspectives on the project. Thank you.
It's so good to see you guys.
Great to see you. It's so fun to be able to talk about this show.
What do you think? What are your first references that first come to mind? Like when you first see the thing?
Okay, so walking in, I had this sense of like a centripetal force that was pulling architectural features together into a mass. And all of a sudden, as I approached the object, I saw like small features, dado rail, sill, stair profile that would, as you move around, they emerge and you can identify them, and then they get subsumed by the mass. And what was very strange to me also was the effect of hollowness, because these features are no longer tied to their kind of material reference and identities, they seem to be dematerialized because everything is in white stucco. It produces this sense of hollowness, but at the same time, there's definitely a mass implied by that core object. So to me, that was a really provocative mixing of cues in terms of what is this architectural substance. The other thing I thought was amazing is that the idea, if we think to how a kind of conventional humanist perspective would work, the human subject is sort of centered in the architectural surround, centered in the worldview. In this exhibition, you're totally then pulled out to the periphery. And just even the way the camera works, rotating around the object, it's like as a viewing subject, I am now peripheral, I'm reoriented. So that was a really powerful effect. I love that quality.
For me, the thing that stuck out right away was the containerized architecture. So I had a hard time seeing it. Like Kristy was talking about it as a core. And I could see it as a core, but that wasn't my first impression. And it's like one of those optical, like double optical things where you either see the vase or you see the profile. It's like once I saw it the way that I saw it, it was hard for me to then turn around and see it as a core. And it has to do with, I think, what you're talking about, Marcelyn, about the mass and the hollowness at the same time. Well, for me, I walked in and saw basically a giant water bottle, if you will, or a giant kind of tall glass, especially because of the way the base sits on the ground, of kind of a concentrate of architecture, as if it were magically in a container that I could not see. And therefore, my impression was of a vessel filled rather than a core extracted. I was forced to make the switch over to something that was positive rather than negative, or negative in the other sense, rather, that doesn't really make sense, rather than positive. But that kind of like presence absence, like you might get in a cast, or like you might get in a something that's standing in for something that's not there, it was troubling in a good way, because I kept looking at it and trying to figure out, well, okay, it doesn't have the smooth surface of a cast. It has a rough surface. And it doesn't have, there's no sense that you're looking at like a Rachel White read where you're seeing the negative of something else. You're definitely seeing positive bits. But then the way that it's all smushed into, like a soda bottle was just it was delightfully difficult, because I kept switching back and forth about whether I was seeing the thing or whether I was seeing the sign of the thing.
Since I didn't go to the space and see it yet, and I've only been looking at the images and the video, I was trying to figure out between the kind of thing in the gallery and the things that are projected, I was trying to figure out what came first, right? Like, is the projection on the core, or is the core projecting on the walls? But I thought that the kind of effect of this sort of hyper sort of in-betweenness of the thing itself and the space that it seemed to produce was really powerful. Just in the images alone, where you couldn't really tell what it was, but at the same time there was a sense that there's a lot of space happening. There's a lot of volume and space and like cavities, and the details of the core kind of being sort of projected at a larger scale.
Well, there are some really powerful moments that I love when watching the virtual instantiation of this, where the kind of rotation of the camera around the core sample produces moments where like the stair tread will align with a graphic line that's in the digital model. And sometimes the fillet will be continued. Like there are amazing moments where it gets into sync. And then you're not sure what space you're actually in. And then again, as it continues to rotate, sometimes it seems to split off. And then I had the feeling that there is like a larger space, another room behind that core. And I felt like I was between the two. But in those moments where they sync up, it's almost like you get flattened and compressed. I thought that was just really powerful in the digital instantiation of it.
There are those moments though, and Marcelyn, I felt that too when I was looking at the digital version, or the kind of augmented version, where you do feel like it's almost like the breath is getting squeezed out from you because you can't tell where you are in space, and you have no idea how much space you have around you. And this is, I think, a really important feature of some of BairBalliet's explorations, is this this way that they seem to take the thinness of architecture, particularly the thinness of architecture in kind of an academic setting where we deal a lot with representations, and they manage to fatten that up so that you feel like you're a tiny occupant in the middle, like they caught in the swirl of the balletic motions of architecture itself. So I'm thinking of their loud lines PS1 thing, which is like my favorite thing, where all of a sudden the lines get so graphic that they become these giant pipes, that just completely take over the space. And the architecture is what's doing the work. And I felt that way a little bit when I saw the augment. You don't feel that way when you're in person and you're just seeing the thing. It's a solitary thing. It stands alone in the middle of the gallery. It has a quality like a column, like a Doric column standing there, that's the old mode of architecture, is like something that is simply important because it's there and because of the way it stands. But then when you see the augmented reality version, that's when you realize, no. This is a space that's so full of architectural action and architectural thickness that there's barely any room for you as a human to also inhabit the space. So I cede to them their cleverness of their title.
And I love the sort of destabilizing effect, as you pointed out earlier, Marikka, with the capsule, sort of the bullnose kind of termination. So it sits on the floor, unlike a column, which would sort of pull the forces down to the floor kind of clearly. This almost has a tenuous relationship where you feel like it could topple. And so again, that identity of like core sample, column, or line with a kind of, the thickened line going back to loud lines, which one is it? So the identity gets very shifty as well. The other part of this, I think, that was really striking to me was the silhouette that was formed at the top of the piece, which was difficult to see inside of the gallery. But then if you go up onto the mezzanine of the SCI-Arc Gallery and look at the kind of overall silhouette and start to think about how that on a larger scale, just tying into what Marikka's saying about if this becomes an architectural scale and it's built in the world, that kind of silhouette making and how it changes locally, it creates its own kind of skyline in a sense. And I think there was this odd, to me, sense of scale, like some things that might be diminutive, like the dado rail. It might also be operating on the scale of furnishing, like an interior scale, a domestic scale. But then suddenly when that gets manifest in this mass, in this kind of core sample capsule, I start to think of all of these incredible effects that almost like turning the interior inside out and then making it a much vaster space.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the idea of the figured, like a building that contains its own skyline is such a cool idea. And I wish people would put hats on their buildings all the time, just like to make it, especially because I think it ties into their larger kind of exploration about what's graphic versus what's math, and constantly like messing with your head about what you're seeing and your relationship to it. Is it a drawing? Is it a representation? Is it a thing? Is it a mass? Is it solid? Like you were saying, Marcelyn, is it solid or is it empty? Is it lack or is it presence? You know, that kind of oscillation or that flickering back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's a way of making architecture difficult and of making it kind of non-consumable, so that you look at it and it's a pleasure to keep looking at it and to realize that you're in the presence of something that might imply a different world than the world that we're normally in. And it's a kind of really productive discomfort that I feel is very essential in terms of what architecture does in the world and what architecture does in culture. And see it like miniaturized in this space and then magnified as soon as you get into augmented reality is like, it's a 1-2 punch. It's really clever.
If you didn't know, if there was no augmented reality, the blue, the blue walls around the capsule are so well aligned to the capsule itself, like the way the bottom is sort of filleted, or just the subtle shape in the kind of unfolding of the space of the blue. It seemed to me from the images that it was almost as if it was a wrapper around the capsule that sort of unfolds around it, and it seems to sort of enclose the capsule in a way that where all the kind of nuances of the geometries within the capsule get sort of pulled out, and so it almost maybe it doesn't even need the augmented reality for you to kind of understand the piece itself.
Well, the blue screen, that's a great point, Jackie, because I think, my impression was also sometimes, should I take it literally? Because when you enter the gallery, also the title wall, the use of blue is like, that's literal blue. That one is not a blue screen. Then the other ones are performing as blue screens. So they become almost like a backdrop for another architectural space to live on that surface temporarily, but then at the same time they are there, they're physically present, and the fact that it's not just a thin veneer, but it's it has a thickness and it has a presence. And so again, this sort of, that's where I love the slip between, is there a degree of abstraction? Am I meant to take it literally, part of the space, that edge, and even the way they're cut? And so I know that yes, at moments I meant to take it literally, but then it also has another kind of performance, which is the blue screen. And then it also operates almost like a photographic, the cyc, where you, have the kind of infinity wall, even though there is a right angle, but the blue screen meeting blue screen. So that ability for physical things in the gallery to behave in ways that are sometimes abstract and sometimes literal, I think is a really provocative move. One more reference that came to mind from the art context would be Gordon Matta-Clark's Four Corners, where you have 4 chunks selected from the periphery, the edges of the building, and then repositioned in the gallery at the exact dimension where they were extracted from, so that you actually fill in the gap. And what struck me here was that this, again, the centripetal force that drew all of these architectural features into this mass did the opposite. It was almost like I had to extrapolate out and start to make the connections back to the virtual surround that's kind of spinning on the blue screens. And that I think is a really lovely inversion, this idea of how we might sense an implied continuity between things, and then sort of, grapple with how we create that connection. So I would agree with a lot of the things that you're saying, Marikka and Jackie, about the way in which it draws us in quite literally, even though there is in some moments no more room for us as occupants, but it does create a sense of wonder. And, the fact that we've been having this kind of great conversation about it is testifies to that.
I like that they're continuing a long tradition at SCI-Arc. Makes it feel like, it's right at home.
Mm-hmm.
We hope you are all enjoying the show. Now for our final segment entitled Real Talk, where we've asked some of our favorite kids to give us some of the harshest and most entertaining critique. They tell it like it is.
It looks like a weird, looks like if it looks kind of like a hot dog that cut into weird shapes.
Hello, my name is Vesper and
My name is Vera.
and we're gonna watch some videos.
My name is Emerson. This is my little brother TJ. There's like this room. It's painted, some of it is blue. And it says no more room. And then there's this huge water bottle shaped thing in the middle of the room.
Okay.
Next video.
Next video.
Ooh, there's two screens?
They're showing two different views.
Two different views. I really like this model.
Yeah, me too. I like seeing it from two different views at the same time.
I mean, I have no idea what it is, but it looks nice.
Yeah, definitely nice.
It looks like if you would put it on a spaceship, like a jet. It looks kind of like a rocket. I don't know why there's like super much lines. There's like 5 of them, 6, 12, 11.
It was like really confusing to imagine. There was like this huge white thing that was really tall. And then there was all these objects flying around in multiple spaces.
And if you make it big, you can see on the ground here, it's glowing. We're just going back to one video looking at something.
That's really cool.
When the screens were showing. So
Yeah, it
looks like it's going right through the floor. It looks so cool.
The bottom is rounded, but there's like a little place to put it down. And then nothing sticks out, so it's like you rounded it into, like it was formed in a huge bottle, and then you carved into it.
It's almost like a museum, something where people go to see something. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna hang out here. I need to have
I don't like the sort of the ground that it is.
maybe like changing the color of the ground.
Yeah, something like that. It's pretty much beautiful.
When it was on the ground, it reminded me of, oh, this is going to be a bench or something. I thought it was going to be a bench, but then I found out that it was going to be tipped up. And then I understood that it looked kind of like staircases, and yeah.
Oh, we're getting a view of the stair. Well, like kind of a view, but technically a back view of what we're just seeing. And we can't really see the stairs that clearly, but we can see the stairs are definitely there. I like how there's actually a little metal.
Yeah, it's almost like
it's a railing.
It's almost like it's a real step, and there's a little man. I mean, it's probably a big man. Like inside of it, if you don't care about those lines and those edges on the front and the bottom. It looks kind of like a couch. So much room to walk, and it's so beautiful. So
maybe
you could just pop the roof up. Doesn't really matter.
Yep.
I mean, but they can do what they want. But I'd like that to be popped up, and maybe the lights, you could just lower them.
That's probably where the door leads. There's probably stairs and they can go over.
Probably.
Because they're probably taking high views of this beautiful model.
Yeah, that'd be very, very understandable.
Yes.
It looks definitely interesting.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our next gen, or maybe they would be next gen critics for helping us close the event on such an entertaining note. Just a couple of announcements before we go. A reminder to please check out the website on the SCI-Arc events webpage where you signed up to, or where you logged on for the live stream. Or as the kids say, you can smash that blue rotating floating button. And then also check back in on the website in a couple of weeks and then towards the end of the run of the show for episodes as they release. I'm going to hand it over to Kristy just to have the last word and do some more questions.
All right, thank you. Well, this concludes our opening evening festivities. Thank you all for joining us and tuning in. And thank you for everyone that had a large or a small role in this project. Anyone that has ever done an exhibition or a project of this size know that it takes many people to make something like this happen. And we are grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you so much, Kelly. As always, it's awesome working with you. And we wish you all a good night. Thank you.